over to the table, and we will also invite our other speakers. Please welcome Jean-Dominique Senard, CEO of Michelin Group, and Vincent Korbesen, CEO of PTV Group. So, to begin with you, Jean-Dominique, you worked a lot with new technology and promoted innovation within Michelin. In innovation in electric vehicles, you invented that electric wheel. Your company is also working a lot on sustainability within the company and also for society. And since 1998, you have the Bibendum Challenge, wanting to promote clean, safe, affordable mobility. Right. And I know you've written a green paper. Yes. Maybe I'm saying too much now, right. But I know you will present that in November in Chengdu, and it's circling around 5 different convictions, and you're saying we need to think more holistically. How?
Okay. Thank you for these kind words. By the way, speaking after Bertrand, because just bringing back to me a word of humility, if you see what I mean. I mean, after what he has done, it's just amazing. So, but I like just to witness a few convictions that we carry in the company, and personally I do also. I represent here a company that has been in the sustainable mobility for the past 125 years. We strongly believe that mobility is part of growth, and you cannot oppose mobility and growth, which you hear more and more these days because of transportation and the role of transportation in the CO2 emission. So we need to fight against that idea, and this company, Michelin, has been doing that for so many years. You see, you mentioned 5 convictions, so I just want to be matter of fact and go to the point. We need to be very pragmatic now and matter of fact. We all understand what's going to happen in the coming years, notably through this urbanization issue. 70% of the population is going to live in towns in some years. I don't know exactly when, but it's going to be short. We need to think about all that. So 5 points. 1, we badly need that the governments in the world take specific measures in terms of limiting CO2 emissions. I think we need all to understand that. We not need to be frightened about that. We just need to move ahead. If governments are useful for something, they're useful for that. Help us all to think about regulations. We already have some sort of things that are happening in the world. Just give an example. The tire industry knows well in Europe that there are now some specific regulations that you cannot manufacture any sort of tire in Europe in the coming years, because if not, you're not going to be compliant with all the CO2 emissions factors and protection of the environment. Why don't we do that massively for the rest? So when it comes 2015 and this conference of parties, we need to understand that it has to be major and certainly not overlooked. So that's the message I would say generally to the governments. The other 4 are more linked, I would say, to this issue about urbanization. We badly need, I think, to now impose in the world this notion of ultralight emission zones. We're not going to make it if we don't have that type of thinking. And that also perhaps comes top-down from legislations, regulations. Why not? You gave wonderful examples of that in your speech. We also, and that we have our part of the game to play, we have to think about this notion of last-mile freight delivery. For us, it's absolutely essential. When you think of what's going to happen in the coming years, we know that this transport segment is going to just become huge. We already see signs of that, and nobody really knows how to manage it, really. So when I say we have our part to play as a company, we know how to manufacture the tires we need to give to the people there, but we can't do it alone. We need everybody involved there. But this issue of last mile freight delivery is absolutely essential. Then it comes to other type of pragmatic solutions. The issue about door-to-door solutions. Everybody's familiar with the station-to-station solution, but we need to go one step further. And the door-to-door solution is obviously something that we need to think of. It means involving all sorts of mobility. E-mobility, of course, is there, but soft mobility also, and the software, all the connected mobility is all part of that. So these new solutions there are really behind that. And perhaps I'd like to mention this issue that all what I've just discussed there is probably possible. I would never say it's impossible, you know, but some say it's impossible. But we cannot think of this future without involving a sort of cooperation between private world and public world. Everybody has its role to play. The public through regulations, some financing, but not all. And the private sector has to be there, because we cannot think about mobility in the future without involving this huge private sector worldwide, because of new technologies, because of this new philosophy and this new mindset. So we will have to think deeply these new sort of alliances between the public and the private, thinking and funding. I think that's absolutely essential. So these I think are really the points, the major points that I would like to sort of stress here. And perhaps as a sort of first conclusion, I mean, an optimistic view to mention that the mindset is changing in the world. We can feel that. Obviously, these sort of sessions tells us that. Companies are thinking, we are thinking, you know, we're not going to stop thinking. We've fought for 227 years we're going to do it more in the future. And so I remain extremely optimistic when I see people like Dana do what they do and the mindset of people changing. Thank you very much for your attention.
I know you think, I like one follow-up question here. I know you think there's a massive deployment of solutions that are needed, and not much will happen if we do these sort of marginally corrected solutions. But are we brave enough to take these steps? What is your sense of when you're talking to people on high levels?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of words, there's a lot of articles, there's a lot of thinking. We're not yet exactly where we should be in terms of will, determination. It's not here in this arena that I'm going to have an issue with that. I mean, I think it's not a problem. It's more in the outside world, and everybody and people like you and you also probably encounter the same sort of problem. This is why there are some agendas and dates which are extremely important. And for me, not only because it happens in France and, in 2015, but this issue about this time at the conference of parties, you know, this is the right time. If that turns around at that point, well, then we have a good chance to get things done. Because then many people will be involved at the highest level in the governance of the world. I mean, I remain quite optimistic. I can only tell you that as a Michelin team, we will do our best to bring this forward and to mention that private companies can do exactly what I just mentioned before and help. So let's just be optimistic.
Yeah, let's just be optimistic. That's good. So turning to you, Vincent Kobesen, the slogan for PTV Group is the mind of movement. You work with different technology, software solutions such as green intelligent transport systems, intelligent cargo systems, etc. PTV Group has also done some research project focusing on green megacities and urban planning concepts. And these days, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about it, this conference, big data, real-time data, but what does that mean in reality when it comes to transportation?
Yes, thank you very much, Elisa, for your kind words. Yes, the mind of movements, that's PTV. And I actually prepared a short statement for also the politicians here in the audience here, because I don't often get a chance to talk to so many politicians and ministers. Dear Secretary General, who made this possible for us as well, of the ITF, dear ministers, and of course, dear ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to be here today and to talk to you about the necessity of mobility that is fit for the future. The question of today for me is how can we improve transportation by using real-time data. We all know that new infrastructure is costly. It takes a long and complex process to deliver, and it has a strong impact on the environment. So the key for livable cities, for the new livable cities, is actually how can we use the existing infrastructure more efficiently and more intelligently. We know that the technology is available, and actually PDV is providing technology for that. We are an IT company in the IT technology. So PDV, we call ourselves a smart software company. We're operating in a niche. What we say, our slogan is actually not only the mind of movement, but we plan and optimize everything that moves people and goods worldwide. So actually we are active in two market areas. It's actually the public sector with traffic planning software, and we're active in the private sector, the industry sector, with transportation optimization software. We do that with 600 people worldwide, so it's really an amount, on 5 continents, and we are delivering our software in more than 120 countries in the world. We plan with PDV almost everything on the basis of historical data. So the movement of people and goods based on historical data. But now we actually were looking to a new era. Real-time data is there. So we will and we can predict almost everything which is on the move on the basis of real-time data. And that's the new challenge. That's actually the pioneer here today. We saw it in the film. We feel a bit like a pioneer as well in our industry. But the challenge is actually, how do we get access to the real-time data? That's the question. In fact, the world of today has evolved. We have entered a new era in data handling. I can explain it to you. All of you here in the room carry a device, and that stores actually all our movements, all our preferences and personal information. And it's interesting to see that 90% of you, including me, are returning home when we have forgotten actually, you know it already, our mobile phone. These devices need to be seen actually as part of the city's intelligence of the future. The same way as we have now static detectors, navigation devices, onboard computers, and also the social media which is running on real time. What can real-time data do for you, and what does it mean in your lives actually? And especially when you look to our industry, I brought you 4 examples. 1, it's actually traffic management. Imagine traffic lights where the signal timing is adjusted to the exact moment of the arrival of the car, the bus, the tram, or the truck. This ensures a minimal environmental impact on what will happen. It's a reliable, seamless, and efficient transport for everybody. Second, it's actually the movement of goods in cities. Here, real-time data can optimize freight transport by sharing loads and vehicles. And this means, this ensures efficient freight transport into cities, and it will minimize empty running. Third, the parking situation, and everybody knows what does that means. Driving in a city, you can't find a parking place, but real-time data helps you in finding an empty parking place, so that you don't have to drive around the block to look for a vacant one. And specific truck apps, and we are building truck apps, are helping the truck drivers in finding suitable parking places for their trucks, and safe parking places, of course. The last point where real-time data can help us, and it's an important point, is road safety. Our children driving to school in the morning on their bikes, the same time where heavy trucks and buses are entering the city. Simultaneously transport optimization of heavy traffic flows and personal flows will ensure and will minimize accidents. And this will make roads safer for everybody. We from PTV have been planning over the years on the basis of historical data. But big data is now collected and is available in real time. But despite the fact that real-time data is generated by the people, it stays mainly in the hands of commercial companies and it's locked away. Now I come to my recommendation towards you, ministers and politicians. We need you, as policymakers, to establish rules to make real-time data accessible for everybody, so that we can create services on that. And of course, it should be done in a safe and secure manner. And the services we will build that will benefit each member of the society. Of course, we know that these data contains personal information, but these privacy issues should be solved by making the data anonymous. My ambition as representative of the IT industry is here that you provide this legislation so that we as IT industry can build a safer, greener, smarter and more intelligent and livable city. Thank you very much.
We actually discussed this a bit yesterday in a session, the ministers from UK and Portugal, and they both said they are aware of this issue, but it will take some time to solve. So what are you expecting time-wise?
Yeah, I have to be careful here, because I expect a lot, of course, but the infrastructure is under pressure, and everybody knows, and it's a political issue. So the politicians, they don't have too much time for this. On the other hand, political decisions will take time, and I'm aware of that. But the initiatives of countries which are taken already, yeah, it's making me happy. But when I'm honest, it will take some years.
I mean, both Michelin, PTV Group, you both talk about sustainable mobility, and there's a large change that needs to happen. What do you see we need to do to make this change?
Well, first of all, we need just to carry on as we are in our mindset and pushing hard. Honestly, I mean, you mentioned the time that we need to change the regulations and all that sort of thing. But you gave the perfect example of what can happen when people, individuals or companies push things forward. This is linked, by the way, to the point I mentioned about mobilizing the private funding around the world. You see, if I look back at what happened in the history of my company, all innovations in our sector came through initiatives from the company. And then these innovations brought the people and created the environment and not only the mindset, but the real regulations. If you don't bring technology, and this is why innovation is so key. I mean, my company is living and surviving and will survive for the next 200 years because of innovation. It's the key point. When it comes out and people just realize what we can bring as a change to the earth, change to the health of people, the change, it's unbelievable. Well, then things follow up. So I haven't got much to say apart that we need to push innovation as far as possible. Whenever it's possible, wherever it's possible, countries must help subsidizing. If they subsidize something, they subsidize innovation. But they must push and help the private sector to get there. That's the only way we will get through.
Do you agree, Vincent? Push?
Yes, of course. We as PTV, we see ourselves as pioneers as well. So I totally agree, opposite side of the table. For also entrepreneurial pioneership, you need a bit of guts, and we as a company have that. So we are we're quite far with our innovations, and of course we expect the politicians to do something else and to come up with the legislation here. But even when it takes some time, we will go on. We will move on with that. So we have some examples already up and running. Maybe not always with the most accurate data there is, but we're just starting. So we know that this is actually a new era where we're stepping in. Our business is actually is changing from the historical data. Actually, planning for tomorrow we are stepping in a day where we are on the way at the moment. We are on the way, and we want to plan again. So that's a 24/7 business. So it needs pioneership to handle that, and our company is ready for that.
Perhaps if I just may add something to follow up what you said. I feel very close to you, you know, honestly. It's not because I'm manufacturing tires that I don't feel close to you. The IT environment is changing our world. But the point where I want to come is that we cannot be alone. And we at Michelin like to federate energies and people. And by the way, we don't have much choice because the future is there. I mean, we're not just going to go and progress with our products. We're going to progress with products and services which lie on open innovation. They rely on brilliant initiatives and open innovation. And you're part of our world.
So Bertrand, you often say that we are sort of hindered by our fear, and you mentioned it a little bit in your speech as well. So what is needed for us to overcome this fear and actually change? I mean, the thing with your plane and the technology, and if we just use it, we would halve the energy consumptions. That's amazing. So why aren't we doing it?
I think we are blocked by our fear of change and our search for habits and convictions. And this is what is blocking the future. So if we want to change something, I believe we have to work on identifying very clearly what we deeply believe. What are the paradigms in which we are? And then we have to work on these paradigms. Because you cannot change the mindset of the people immediately. But you can have people really identify what they deeply believe in order to know what has to be changed. And for example, what I urge you to do in governments is to put 3 ministries together. Not to make just one ministry, but 3 should work together. It's transport, it's energy, and it's industry. Because as long as we cut the problem into pieces, it will never work. If you just identify the energy you need for transportation, it's enormous. You can be depressed with that. But if you put the industry together, for example, the people building houses, with the Minister of Energy, you realize that probably in the future the energy for transport, at least for individual transport, will be made on the roof of houses. And the energy saving in the insulation of houses can be used for transportation. And you have to put all of that together. And then you need a chief on top, a leader in the country, prime minister or president, who urges everybody to set the goals. If you have a very precise goal, and you know for sure that the maximum CO2 production of a car will be 30 grams in 5 years, then the industry will know exactly where and how to invest to reach that goal, because the technologies already exist. But as long as we don't have the goal and the target really clearly fixed, the industry will keep its technology for later on, because the old technology will be enough. And also, if we don't know if the future will be more focused on houses or industry or transport, nobody will invest. People will wait. And waiting is really expensive today in terms of environmental problems. So these are really the things I would urge you to do.
But when we talk about climate change and environment today, it becomes almost like a red flag, like you mentioned. You know, we see this 40 years ahead, and I don't want to bother with that. But I know you went to Switzerland, and I know you changed their minds. What did you do?
I stopped to speak about protection of the environment. Because this is, exactly as you say, it's a red flag. It's a repulsive argument. Because if you need to pay the salary of your employees tomorrow in an industry, you cannot think about what happens in 40 years. You need to pay the salaries. You have people to pay. It's a short-term problem. So let's try to get rid of this argument of protection of the environment and make it protection of humankind, protection of human beings. In the protection of human beings, you have the economy. You have the salaries of the people. That means, what are the technologies today that can stimulate growth and that can make profit and create jobs? And so often I was brought to different governments, including Switzerland, to speak to the opponents of all these topics. And when they understood what I was speaking about, they told me, oh, this is interesting. I thought you were going to speak to me about protection of nature, but you're speaking to me of something else. Now I'm ready to listen to you. And when you have a vote that is changing because of discussions I had with parliamentarians, then it's interesting. A guy on the far right wing in Switzerland called me, wrote me an email after a vote that had been positive for solar power and told there was one voice majority, one. And the guy wrote me, it was my voice. Because I met you last Monday, I was ready to vote no. After meeting you, I voted yes. So these are the things you really have to bring the motivation and the solutions and the incentives rather than always the problems and the cost and all these things that will discourage everybody.
But when we talk about this is green and sustainable mobility and creating the infrastructure that will work this way, we talk a lot about new solutions, innovations, etc. Is there something today that is you feel is hindering innovation? Do we have already all the solutions that we need? We're not just using them?
Yes. I think we are full with ideas as a company. We have, and I think what we hear today, not only today but the last couple of days, so much ideas about innovation in transportation. So I don't feel that we don't have these ideas. But of course, legislation and regulation, that's important, and that's why here the public sector and the private sector come together. And that's what's so interesting about this whole convention here, is that these two worlds meet and see what's going on. The industry is capable of doing a lot, I think, and the public sector has to see that we are able to do that. So we have to cooperate together, and that means that from both sides, the infrastructure has to. We have to give a bit away so that means the public sector have to give away a bit of the part of the infrastructure so that the logistics, for instance, can use it better. And the private part have to give a bit away of the data so that in that area the public sector can do something. So this is a way of cooperation. So.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I totally agree with what you just said. But the technologies really exist. I mean, they're not perhaps all of them. I mean, of course, but I get the point that technologies are there. But there is an issue. I mean, just have to be conscious about that. I mean, we can just only dream. The industry has to take over afterwards and industrialize. And it's not always easy because we have to admit as industrialists that ideas can be there, technologies can be found, tested, but then when you come to industrialize that and make it at a very large scale, you enter problems that you don't necessarily imagine. I can tell you, I mean, it's my day-to-day life. So that sometimes hinders things, you know. When you mentioned 30 grams per kilometers in 5 years, well, you know, I mean, okay, but you're going to run into a tremendous discussion about, gee, how do we really actually do it? I mean, if you have to change all the plants in the world of all the manufacturers of cars and tires and all the rest, it's going to be painful. I mean, you just need to have that in mind. So your point about hindering is there. I'm not pessimistic at all. I mentioned that the technologies are probably at hand. the issue behind, and as an industrialist, I have to tell you that sometimes, well, gee, it's not easy.
Do you also get the feeling that you want to push these new technologies out to the people and you're stopped by something?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, what I'm doing just in my private life in terms of energy saving is tremendous. I divided by 3 the cost of my heating system in my house in the last 2 or 3 years. It can be done everywhere. It's an investment, but people make a confusion between investing and spending. They think something is expensive, so they shouldn't do it, and they don't understand what is all the money they can get behind. I save more, I get more money from my energy saving than on the stock exchange market. Because the technologies are here. So of course, I know that for the industry, the only way to really get to a very ambitious goal is to be obliged to do it. So if you are the only one who wants to do it,
you don't really want to hear this.
No, but you know, no, but it's going to be too difficult if you are the only one. If the governments put a target and all your competitors are obliged to do the same thing, then you will be safe. But the problem today is that you have some pioneers who take the risk of going into a direction, and sometimes they lose. The people who invested a lot in the last 5 years in solar energy in Europe lost their money. Because there was not a clear goal of what Europe was going to do with solar energy. So we have to understand that a lot of people are afraid of that risk because there's no coordination, no consultation. Once the industry has the target, then they can work on it. But as long as they don't have the target to reach, I was provocating with the 30 grams of CO2, but you will see the one who will come long enough in that forum will see the day where there will be 30 grams per 100 kilometers of CO2.
I would love to continue talking with you, but our time is unfortunately up. So thank you very much, Bertrand Picard, Jean-Dominique Senard, and Vincent Corbison.
Thank you to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So earlier on I mentioned equality as a part of the agenda for our infrastructure. And how do we build a system that is both green and socially inclusive? That is what the next part of this plenary will be about. So please welcome all the way from India this morning, Geetam Tiwari, professor at Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi. You're specialized in urban transport and traffic planning. And Anders Brännström, chairman of the board for Volvo Research and Educational Foundations. And Tyrell Duncan, who is director at the East Asia Transport Division at Asian Development Bank. So I would like to begin by saying that we all know that at governments all across the globe we have huge difficulties budget-wise, building public transportation, metro systems, etc. It costs a lot of money. And especially in the developing countries, we see that there's a huge part of society being sort of informal and often poor group. They live and they move around in the city, but they're not really part of the conventional transport system. But even here in the developed countries, we also have areas and sectors where it's more difficult for people to get a good transport and to be able to afford it as well. So how do we plan our transport system to reach and include everyone? What do you think is the role for transport in promoting social equality? It's not an easy question, I know, but I would like you to try and answer it. If you would like to start, Geetam.
Yes, thank you. I think transport has a huge role to play. And answer to your question that how can it be done, I'd like to quote a pioneering speaker in the first session. We need innovation. We need to completely move away from how we have thought about mobility and accessibility. In fact, I take some cues from what you said. However, I want to interpret it differently. which is that if we keep thinking about mobility, we are still saying the same thing which we said in the last century. And in this 21st century, when we face different challenges, climate change did not exist in the last century. So then I would like to change our focus from mobility to accessibility, which is what the sustainable transport and inclusive transport is all about. So that would be my starting point, that we have to start thinking transport in terms of providing accessibility, and that is what leads to actually more inclusive and sustainable transport. By definition, it means that we are providing for people who cannot afford cars, who cannot afford to live in certain kinds of places, what our planners have envisioned for. So I think the basic step comes from this, thinking completely differently and taking a lot of cues. Actually, my second take on this would be taking a lot of cues from self-organizing systems. Because I think human beings are hugely innovative, and especially when it comes to dealing with survival challenges. Survival is the most basic instinct in human beings. So we really have to go back and look at a lot of things that people are doing under extreme survival conditions and take cues from there.
And you mentioned accessibility, and I think that is what you want to talk about.
Yes, I should mention that we have then sponsored research in many transport areas, and over the last few years we have realized that actually mobility is important, but if you change the perspective, try to change the paradigm to access and look at how to create access, you have the same questions, but you look on them from a different angle. And I think that's actually what Gautam is referring to conceptually. But we think that that's an area where actually innovative solutions could be developed, and also help politicians or decision makers really understand that access is a way. If you look at communities from an access point of view, you also have to think more about land use, more about how you charge for various services, and thereby you also can establish perhaps self-organizing, but at least you can help to facilitate life for those who have very little. So I think that access is a very, very good starting point.
And what is your take on all of this, Tyrell?
Well, I think we all agree that everybody needs transport to do what they need and what they want. That means they need access. It needs to be affordable. To be sustainable, it also needs to be clean and safe. The transport planning discipline has long experience in working out options for people. It needs to start with what are people's needs, where are they, and generate possible options and solutions. A great deal of time is needed on consultation, because the people know what they want and also what would be affordable for them. One of the problems with that is that there's a tendency for rigidity, for certain types of solutions to become stuck, and the planners and the people working on highways or other modes to just think the solution must be more of the same. As speakers are saying, it often needs to be something different. I'd just like to say that as my work is in developing Asia, and it includes half the world's population, rural access remains important. Here we have talked a lot about essentially urban issues, and there's been very interesting and relevant inputs on things like ITS. But I think nearly half of Asia's population is below $2 a day, and many of them are in rural areas and still need basic transport access if they are to be included. In urban areas, there's a very different situation emerging. In China, for example, in 1990, there was about a quarter of the population lived in cities. Today, it's over half. There's a rapid urbanization, and that means that there's a great deal of need for appropriate urban transport systems. The poor will probably be on the periphery of the city. How are they going to get access to employment and services if they don't have affordable transport options? That often they may have informal transport available, which is a very useful thing, but it may not provide the lowest cost option. Mass transit systems, and as we've talked about, if the urban planning is adjusted to support the type of cycling and walking we see here in Leipzig, this can be convenient and attractive for people. One other point is that the IT development of things like smart cards can play a valuable role in helping make the use of public transport more convenient and attractive with easy transfers and so on. It also contains within it the means for offering concessions. If government wish to offer concessions to, for example, the elderly, people with disabilities, or people on low incomes, if there are ways of verifying these things, then that can easily be administered through smart card schemes, and some of the sorts of provisions that we see in advanced countries can then be used in developing countries.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the fares and how to try to make them equal, but you also mentioned walking and cycling, and from what I understand from a report I read about India and about women and about safety, and how when the city is growing, we forget about the people walking and the people cycling, and everything is just built for cars. So is there a way to when the city is like this organic being, just spreading out on its own, and there's no planning involved, how can you change that? Do you have any experience of that it's possible? If we take India, for example.
First, let me start with, I would like to challenge this concept that poor always have to live at the periphery. I think that's what traditionally has been done by formal planners. But what I talked about self-organizing systems, people themselves, when they locate, they don't locate themselves at the periphery of the city. So if we start understanding this, why? Are people come to city to have a piece of land and build a house there? Or are people coming to cities because they want access to employment? I think this is what when planners, as planners, we have to understand, and we have to come up with techniques and technologies how to integrate this and then implement it on the ground. That's when then you would lead to this, start answering the question that today in many of the emerging economies, countries like India, especially India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, etc., China may be to little bit less than what has happened in other places for other reasons. A large percentage of people are walking not by choice, but because, they are not doing it by choice because they have no other option. They have come to the city to have access to employment and livelihood. And as planners, we tend to sever this link. And we continue to go with the concept that poor will have to live at the periphery, and then let's provide a transport system to bring here. I think all these are 20th century concepts we have to start challenging now. Maybe not. Maybe we want to have more mixed, heterogeneous land use development in the city, and that is what would enable then formally, not just by defying plans, but formally majority of the people to actually allow walking and bicycling. And as formal planners, we would understand that this is not happening because these people don't have choice, but let us plan our systems that people do this by choice.
And then you're talking about the user experience and putting the user experience
Absolutely.
in the center of things. and Volvo Research and Educational Foundation, you worked with a lot of different projects around the world looking at these situations. Do you have any examples of sort of solutions that can come in handy?
Unfortunately, not solutions, but one solution actually. We are funding a group in South Africa, in Johannesburg, and that has looked at what you call non-motorized traffic or transport, which means walking and biking. And they said, when asking the same question, what are your solution? And they said the symptom or the problem is that most of the traffic planners in Southern Africa, they are reading city planning from United States 1950s, which means walkways, bikeways, they don't even exist so they don't even think this way. So our solution would be new textbooks that for the old and young, old also, but also including the universities, that where biking and walking is more emphasized in their traditional education.
And then you're mentioning the planning, and you're mentioning the planning, and your bank, which is funded by a lot of different governments, is working also with a lot of different projects. How much do you think the planners, the planning, when we invest in infrastructure, has to do with creating the problem?
Well, I think that the planners have a lot of responsibility. I think that in cities in Asia, the phenomenal urbanization has been a challenge for the planners, and we shouldn't just point the finger at them and consider them disinterested. They need support. As Anders mentioned, they do need to update their models. I think there's a very diverse situation across Asia as well, so we should be careful in generalizing. But in China, we see both the bad and some signs of the good. A lot of people know about the Beijing congestion and air pollution problems, but there are also other cities where high-quality mass transit systems have been introduced. We are financing some of these. And along with that, things like citywide cycleways. So people are seeing that the planning methods used in cities like Beijing, with very large blocks and a lack of multiple city centers requiring very long journeys, those are not working. They're creating costs and congestion, and we're seeing some models coming in that offer better solutions. But they need to come in much faster. There's 160 cities over 1 million people in China. Some of them are 20 million. And I think McKinsey estimates that 130 or 140 urgently need mass transit systems.
So when you work with planners, what do you desire?
Well, I'm a planner myself.
But then you have the politicians, and
Yeah, I
even if
think,
you
yeah.
do the best planning in the world, they still have to say yes.
I think that's the challenge that we have to deal with. And that's where I will go back to the first speaker and take a lot of cues from there, that we need innovation in communication. We don't know how to communicate our ideas to convince people. And let me give you a very small example. So in principle, we all know pedestrians and bikeways are excellent. They make the city more inclusive. They also meet a lot of other criteria for sustainable transport, be it CO2 emissions, health, etc., etc. Why are they not attractive even for the bank? Because they are not bankable projects. Bank is looking at mass transit system, yes. These are huge investments in construction, and we can come up with an idea of, yes, in the long term, it's going to give us a lot of benefits. But when you talk about, let's take 5 cities, the cities become really pedestrian friendly, bicycle friendly, it becomes safer for everybody. So so when will it become, but I cannot show in financing terms that it's a bankable project. There is no value capture here. So we need to come up with different indicators of how and different ways of communicating. How do we convince Asian Development Bank this is worth financing?
Well, I've got some good news for you on that front. Actually, in these days, we're now doing about a quarter of our lending for urban transport from next to nothing 5 or 10 years ago. And in many of our projects, we are including non-motorized components. It certainly can be justified. It is often not nearly as expensive as the complex infrastructure for mass transit. So it is becoming a feature. But it also has to be something that the governments give priority to. And what we've found in some countries is that the planners, the development banks, the community groups may be very keen on these sorts of solutions, but the political leaders want to see everybody driving a car. And they want some early results. They think that by building roads, they will show the electorate that they have solved the problem. So, but there are changes, and you can see that in the sort of lending we and other multilateral banks are doing.
Yeah, because we can see across the world there's a tendency to build these enclaves for like the rich and the poor, and the infrastructure can actually help create this when this is something that we don't want. Do you have any examples of I mean, in Bogota, this is a common example of the BRT buses that they created a system. Did that make it more socially inclusive? And
definitely, it improved and made areas that otherwise would have been hard to get to. A lot more included into the city, but you can see a lot of big cities have introduced, and if you do BRT systems or bus corridor systems, actually depends on the context what you can do. You can at a relatively low investment level achieve quite a lot. Unfortunately, as you were indicating before, that governments tend to, city governments and city councils tend to favor light rail and other very easily visible investments. And it's one big project. It's probably easily bankable with the international banks. Whilst if you do a certain level of a BRT system, it's less evident. It's evident, but not to the same extent as when you're building a huge investment. But still, it's inexpensive, and you, relatively speaking, and you can achieve quite a lot. And if you can have a full-blown BRT system, the capacity is far higher than you can have with any light rail system, and the cost is much lower. And in general terms, generalized terms, I would say. So there's a lot of, and Bogota is one good example. The initial starting point was Curitiba many, many years ago, when they actually built the transportation first, and then they built the city around the transportation. And then you can be very inclusive to quite some extent. But Bogota has been a huge success. You have Mexico City that has made a lot of improvements between certain parts of the city. So there are many examples of tremendous improvements that have been achieved.
so if we get over to the question about the fares, and how do we keep the fares equal? Because for some people it's just too expensive to use the public transport. And I come from the rich country of Sweden. In Stockholm it's cheaper for kids, it's cheaper for elderly, for instance, but this can actually create some horizontal inequities. And in worst case, it's like the poor supporting the rich, if you look at some things that you can be doing. And this can also be the case when you start using congestion charges, for instance. And I know in Brazil, there's a program limiting the cost of commuting to 7% of the workers' earnings. This kind of system, is that a way to go in the developing world, to try to make the system affordable and the fares equal?
Yes, I think it is. I think we've talked quite a bit about trying to provide more affordable systems that at least set us at a sensible level, that you could then talk about levels of concessions or subsidies. If you put an extremely expensive system like a metro in a small city, then the level of subsidy will be enormous. in developing countries, this issue is very challenging. In countries which have very, very high poverty levels, you aren't just talking about providing concessions for a small number of people if you choose to help the poorest. But I think there's a diverse experience across developing countries regarding use of concessions. It would be wrong to think that they are not used by many authorities, for example, for the elderly or people with disabilities. One of the problems has been that the things like means testing or the social welfare system that is established in advanced countries and helps to verify who is who and allows you to implement a policy, those are not always in place in a reliable way in developing countries. As I mentioned earlier, there's some hope through these smart cards being a way to help on implementation of these things. We're working in Mongolia, which has got quite established subsidies for the groups I mentioned and school children, but with tremendous leakage that cripples the public transport operators. But by using smart cards, this leakage can be stopped. And
how is this system functioning? You're saying smart cards, but what is it that they do?
Similar to many cities, like in London with the Oyster card, where you have a card that has some credits. You're allowed to use it for several different types of transport.
But how if I'm poor, how does it benefit me?
If you are eligible, you would travel at a reduced fare, and it would be automatically covered through your card, indicating that you were eligible for that reduced fare. And the people operating the system wouldn't every time have to check whether you are eligible, because that would all be encapsulated in the card.
Would this be possible in India, for instance?
Smart card for majority of the people is not possible right now. Maybe we can think some kind of long-term future, but not right away. But at this time, I want to bring in one more issue that I think we can discuss about when we talk about solutions and doing something very different. So my proposal would be to do something completely different. We have to stop thinking about car congestion. As long as we keep talking about car congestion, we keep going back to 20th century. And we keep coming up with smart card ideas, or we keep coming up with all kind of technology which will reduce congestion. But if I have a car and the roads are not congested, I will use car. It's too comfortable. So I think if we are dealing with access, sustainability, and inclusive transport in this century, we have to come up with some other problem that we want to solve and not worry about car congestion. When we do bus lanes, I think the problem is, yes, there will be congestion for cars. If not today, in future. Because unless you fill, if the lanes are free, then I am going to use my cars. And that's when we have to be ready, and we have to have innovative ways of communication and convincing people that the aim is to provide access to majority of the people, and that's precisely what exclusive bus lanes can do.
Do you have
it will lead to car congestion sometime or the other.
Do you have a comment to that?
I completely agree with Gita that there is, you cannot make everybody happy at the same time. Car congestion, there will always be cars used. The question is actually how attractive can you make the alternative? And if you look at some areas, it's also important when we talk about good public transport, so it's not only transport for those who cannot afford to have a car. It should be, as it actually is in New York City, everybody goes by the metro, because in London, because it's comfortable. It may not be comfortable in all aspects, but relatively speaking, it's very comfortable. In other areas, it may be so that if you don't have a car and you cannot use the car, then you go by bus or by metro, and then that mode of transport is not attractive enough. And I think that's another way to look at upon it also, that how can we ensure that whatever offer of transport modes there are, except for the car, they have to be attractive also for the middle class. And it cannot be so that the only way to show that you can afford is to have an expensive car that you can show on the street. I don't know what the solution is, but I think that's a direction to work in order to improve and get better balance. And then a side effect of that is, of course, that you generate fares from full paid fares that also helps to finance the system, whatever system it is in public transport.
I'd like to, at this time, to open up to questions from you in the audience. If somebody would like to, yes, if you, yes, raise your hand, stand up, and somebody will give a microphone to you, the gentleman in the tie there, and then another gentleman behind, a couple of rows behind. If you state your name and the company, organization, government you're working for, and then ask your question, please.
My name is Arvind Kumar, and I was a civil servant for almost 35 years. And I spent 7 years in Ministry of Shipping and Road Transport.
Could you hold the microphone a little closer, please?
Okay. My question is to the panelists and specifically to Professor Geetam Tiwari. First of all, I would like to disagree with the fact that in India, the slum patterns are very different. Like in Delhi, if you look at poor stay in periphery. But in case of Mumbai, where 45% of the households, this is as per the 2011 census, they stay in slums. Slums are adjacent to any condominium or multi-story building. There, I think, poor don't commute. But in Delhi, for instance, my wife's driver, he stays in a place which is almost 20 kilometers away. And he roughly gets a salary which is $200. And he spends almost $35 to $40 on commuting. He doesn't use metro. He only uses bus because metro is a bit expensive and he can't afford. Now, Professor Tiwari said that we need to refashion planning. But in case of Delhi, I think it would be very, very difficult to remodel. Because what is happening, this is true of Delhi, that well-off sections, they stay in the center. And whereas in United States, Canada, and Australia, well-off people stay in suburbs. But in Delhi, it is the poor who stay in the suburbs, and they commute to the center of the city for work. Because you see, in the areas where they stay, there are hardly any options for any employment. And the second, I would say, another fundamental difference between Indian cities and European and Latin American city. The mayor of Bogota is a very important person. But in Delhi, I don't know who is my mayor, because the tenure is just 1 year. He or she doesn't have any financial resources. And the person is totally dependent on whatever central government gives. The third I would like to mention is, she's right, because I was with the Ministry of Highways, and I think one of the priority items of the National Highway Development Program was to create flyovers and in metros. And I think the ministry got a lot of kudos for that, because in Delhi, Mumbai, Calcutta, it was largely financed. And what she's saying is right, because pedestrian or other modes of transport or the related infrastructure is not at all attractive to any banker. Third, I would like to come, like most of the time people say that the value capture when you develop infrastructure. I think what has happened in Delhi or in India, what is happening, it is the government which is paying the compensation at market rates. People who are being shifted wherever metro is going, just to make way. So the value capture has not been there, and I think it is really a challenge. It is easy to say that we can generate a lot of resources, but this doesn't seem to be an option. And finally, I'd like to remind, because when I was an undergraduate student, I was taught Harris-Tedora model of migration, and I think that is still true, because migration is a function of income gap between the rural and urban areas and probability of finding a job. And till such time this equation holds true, I think we can't stop migration to urban areas. Thank you.
Okay, so it was more than a statement than a question, but would you like to comment, Gitam?
Yeah, very quickly. Actually, for Delhi, your numbers are not, your perspective is not correct. And sometimes I feel that's why we need more, better methods of communicating. Because actually, since I am in Delhi, so we keep doing a lot of studies in Delhi, majority poor people, by defying formal plans, live inside the city. If you see a map of Delhi, I don't have it. Actually, I have it. I can show it to you. Slums are all over inside New Delhi and North Delhi and South Delhi. Behind every major commercial building, you have a slum. Not by plan, not by planning. But the issue that I raised, that often these people have to live on a piece of land which is by master plan not meant for living, but they occupy it in quote unquote illegally. So that's how informal settlements start. And this is the reason that if you look at how people travel in Delhi, 34% people in Delhi travel to work by walking. And this is possible only because the slums are inside the city. The difference in Mumbai and Delhi is that in Mumbai, because of Dharavi, it's a very visible slum that you see. Whereas in Delhi, there are pockets all over. You go behind Taj, you go behind all these big commercial places, Nehru Place, in Connaught Place, there are several slums. And actually, slum wing of Delhi has a whole map of it. And we found another method of studying was that if you just look at Google pictures, very quickly you can identify where the slums are. What is happening to people like the example you gave your driver, that is the part of the formal plans. Because especially in the most recent past in 2010, for Commonwealth Games, the government decided to clean the city. Yes. So such people should not be visible to our visitors. And therefore, and then also there was a Supreme Court order in 2001 when 50,000 households were moved out of the city. And that's what I was saying, that by planning, we sever this link. Then these people are given a 12 square meter of space, which is 20, 30 kilometers away, and they have to do the kind of commute you're doing.
Thank you. I believe this is a discussion that could go on for some time, and we're not going to solve it today. I believe we have time for one more question before we're running out of time. So tell us who you are, sir, and remember, keep the microphone close to you.
Yeah. I'm Yoshi Hayashi from Nagoya University, Japan. And also, I'm president of World Conference on Transport Research Society, representing about 1,500 researchers and members. I would like to call your attentions, not only the panelists, but also the participants here. We do need more research. In particular, please, you do more effort to make young researchers to have more attention, interest in developing countries' transport and land use. The reason why I'm talking about this is, the previous gentleman talked about urbanization. I have been working on urbanization for more than 30 years. But the urbanization processes in current developing countries are so different from those done in Europe or America. Value captures also
so
the same.
I'm sorry to cut you short, sir, but we're running out of time.
Yes, please. So, international funding agencies or private companies may provide more chances for young researchers.
So yes,
improve.
I would like to. So you would like more research done, so we better understand what is happening, so we can also plan what to do. And
Yes.
this is exactly what you are working with in the Volvo Research and Educational Foundation. So
What we do is that we support research in future urban transport areas. And in the last few years, we have started the new major programs, two on urban freight, the last mile issues. We are just starting up the program on financing urban access. That is the idea of looking on access rather than mobility. And
so have you found something that you feel we need more research about this?
there is, let's say there are a lot of questions that needs a lot of more research, and there is a lot of young researchers engaged. So actually most of the research we fund are carried out by students or PhD students. But as Gitam's university and institution has been part of our program, and so it's important, and I think that's a good way to develop interest in young students, and that's why we also, by helping to finance research in urban transport issues on that, we'd also grow a new generation of young researchers.
That will become planners and then will solve our problems.
Hopefully.
Thank you so much, Gitam Tiwari, Anders Brännström, and Tyrell Duncan. You may leave the stage because I will welcome I would now like to welcome ITF Secretary General, Mr. Jose Viegas. The stage is yours.
Good morning, everybody. After 3 very intensive days, the Summit 2014 is coming to the end. As we've knew, the theme of this year's summit was very wide. Many complex issues were discussed. And I hope this experience, that shared experience, will help us all ask the right questions. That's where it starts. If you ask the wrong question, you're done. Look at things differently. Put issues in a broader context, and ultimately help our governments at all levels get to better policies. This is what the ITF is all about. Putting up the structure, bringing in some key actors and as catalysts, and engaging with you for that collective experience. Today, this session, this plenary session, was the first one of these 3 days in which I could be from start to end, because in the other ones I've been called for so many other things. And I think it was a beautiful example, because we could speak about pushing for innovation. Bertrand Piccard gave us a good example of that, and how you have to not use only the specialists, or use specialists from different areas, because otherwise they are too boxed in. Bringing in the specific contributions from the government sector and the corporate sector. We are trying to do that. We have created something called the Corporate Partnership Board, in which we have companies working with us in some of these topics. And some of the topics that were mentioned in this session are specifically the object of projects we are developing with the companies. And then bridging this message so that it can come to the governments. And this is part of our whole endeavor. And the summit is the flagship of that process, because we've had ministers here, they're listening to the message. It does not end there. We have other instruments. We have our let's say, regular reports. But now we've also created something called country-specific policy analysis projects, in which countries are calling us to bring to them our advice. And what we learn from these processes is a very important part of what we are delivering to them. So thank you all for coming to Leipzig for this summit. The results will stay with us, and I hope we can use them and apply them. The summaries of all sessions are already on the website. The presentations are available as video on demand on the site. And we will make this easily accessible in multiple ways so that there is no excuse, even for those who could not attend all the sessions. We have all 4 sessions in parallel. We always have, it's an interesting fact, let me go a little out of my agenda. We have 4 parallel sessions normally. And what is happening is that a lot of the people who participate in one session are there with their hearts bleeding because they cannot be at the same time in another session. So we have constant requests from the member countries to not go above 4. But if you go to 2, you need 6 days, and people would not stay 6 days. So what we do now is we have the sessions, and then we have very good material available for you to cry a little less loud because you couldn't be there. So this is the way we're doing it, and from the feedbacks I've received, I think most of the people have been very satisfied with having been here. So words of special thanks must be given to the presidency of France in this year, and Mr. Frédéric Villiers, to our hosts, Germany, Minister Dobrindt, and of course to Mayor Jung for the very kind hospitality. Thanks also to our sponsors. They make it possible to have this level of quality. And that was BMW, Toll Collect, DHL, UND, and DECRA. And it must be said, the summit at this very, very excellent level of quality and systematic performance would not be possible without the total professionalism and commitment of the local team here at the Leipziger Messe CCL. They have been fantastic this year again, as they've been in the years before. They are always available to try to improve from one year to the next, from one day to the next, from the morning to the afternoon. So this perfect commitment to permanent improvement is something that I want to highlight here. And a similar thing has to be said about my team at ITF. The same spirit of getting better every year. And there's a lot of people there, but a special word, special mention has to be given to the leader of that team, Mary Grass. She is the inspiration of all these people here. And it is a large part of the compliments I receive are indeed due to her. So it's a privilege for me to be leading this team in which she's putting so much of her talent and commitment. And so the final message is very simple. See you next year, here in Leipzig, from May 27 to 29. The topic is again very appealing, very bright, very wide. Transport, trade, and tourism. So safe trip back home. I hope you've enjoyed your time you spent here and you keep good memory and good use of the things that we've shared here. Thank you all very much.
A lot, and I hope you feel the same, and I hope you all come back again next year, enjoy Leipzig, and have a safe journey home. So thank you.